Joining us to discuss is Art Del Cueto, a Border Patrol agent and president of the Border Patrol Union in Tucson. And Abel Nunez is the executive director of the Central American Resource Center. Abel, I want to start with you. In a perfect world, what do you think America should do with the 14,000 people approaching our border?
Fine, Lauren. How are you?
Well,
Art, we'll go to Abel first.
Well, I do think that currently we have existing laws that can address the issue at the border. These immigrants right now are in Mexico. They're not at the southern border. And we already have a legal structure that can deal with and vet them and make sure that those that have valid cases can be seen and those that don't will be returned back. We currently do that, and I think we should allow our system, our rule of law, to continue.
Abel, of course, you know, near and dear to my heart you are, because you're from El Salvador, where I spent time when my early 20s, and I have a lot of friends there. Your family is originally from there. The problem is we have 700,000 cases pending now. People who've applied for asylum are supposed to appear before immigration judges. We have 40,000 homeless veterans on our streets right now, every night in the United States. What do you say to the American people out there who've given an enormous amount of money to Central America over the years, welcomed many people legally, like yourself, into the United States and your family? What do you say to those people who say, it's an economic burden for our country. We cannot help the entire world because we have corrupt governments elsewhere?
Well, it's not a zero-sum game. I think what we bring to the table and what immigrants have brought to the table to this nation is to make it strong. And I do think that there's a historical context that we need to also remember, that this nation has had a lot to do with the current conditions in those countries of origin. The fact that they're corrupt governments in no short measure has been done by this government. They are supporting the current governments of the region.
I didn't have anything to do with it. Neither did President Trump. Neither did the people in public schools today who are dealing with overcrowded classrooms where teachers are trying to deal with kids who speak in Northern Virginia 12, 13, 14, 15 different languages. So with all due respect with the historical context, we got to deal with today and the limited resources that the United States has. But I got to get to Art Del Cueto. Art, CNN is calling this, you know, this is just fear-mongering. This is not a problem. You heard what Abel said. We have the systems to process these people. Many of them, he believes, and others, they have legitimate reasons for asylum. How would you respond?
Laura, first and foremost, thank you for having me on. These individuals are not immigrants. These are people that are invading our country. My family, my ancestors are immigrants. These people are trying to enter the United States by force. You've seen the way, the pictures, you've seen the video. When you are kicking down gates to get into a country, when you are entering illegally, when you're trying to avoid inspection, and also when you are waving the flag of the country that supposedly has you so oppressed, how is that something that's beneficial for the United States? It isn't. These individuals, I've said it before many times, there is a humongous difference between knocking on my front door or kicking my front door and forcing entry into my home. And when you see the amount of individuals that are doing it this time, it's nothing else but an invasion by individuals into our country, and it needs to stop, and we need to do the right measures to go out there and stop it. When he's talking about the immigration issues and there's laws, what happens is these individuals will step on U.S. soil, they will check their records, and once we see that there's nothing of a bad record within the United States, keep in mind we can't check their record in the country that they're coming from. What happens is they're giving an immigration date, which they don't plan on showing up to because statistics show that less than 2% actually show up to these dates. And then they're free to be within the United States with no checks whatsoever. This is a humongous problem. These are not immigrants entering our country. These are individuals that are invading our country, and something needs to be done about it.
Abel, there's mostly able-bodied men, adult-age working men in this group. I mean, there are women and children, but the lion's share are adult-age men.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that point.
Well, okay.
We have other information.
I'm just looking at the crowds. I mean, you can eyeball it just as easily as I can eyeball it. And how do you respond to people who would say, look, fight for your country? But you're waving the Honduran flag. I mean, you saw the flags as I did. They had them on the bridges. They had them when they're walking. Fight for your own country. I mean, you're leaving your country. You're an able-bodied man. That's what we did for our country. We founded our republic. Against all odds, the United States, you know, we came out on top. We cast off oppression in our young republic. Why won't these young able-bodied men, not the women and children, but the able-bodied men do the same?
Well, first, I think we need to also put another thing in context. The number of people that are coming historically is at an all-time low at the border. So this is not a new sort of influx of immigrants that are overwhelming
That's not
the
true.
system.
This has been an over. We have a
low.
38% increase of family units crossing the border just
from
this
that
summer.
specific region, but overall, all the numbers are down.
From Mexico, the numbers are lower.
No.
Central America is emptying out into this country.
Exactly.
Emptying out. Central America, Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras are emptying out. And the idea that this is a migration of asylees and refugees, Art, you can help me out. As if all at once everybody's oppressed.
No.
It makes no sense. You got
Laura,
one person in the United States who's helping organize this from Puebla Sin Fronteras, which is a guy who's been arrested within the migrant group. Art.
Laura, the truth of the matter is that for the month of August and the month of September of this last year, our numbers have risen more than they've risen in the last 8 years, I believe. So, no, the numbers have not been historically low. They're going back up, and a lot of the reasons they're going back up is because catch and release is still going on.
No, we're back.
The cartels know it's never stopped.
Yeah,
the cartels know what's going on.
Yeah, all right, we got to go, but you almost can't blame the people who are doing this.
Against us.
Yeah. You almost can't blame the people who are doing it. Well, except for the ones who are injuring police officers. I blame them a lot because they're smashing them in the face.
The law
should be, well, guess what? They're violating the immigration laws of Guatemala, Mexico, and they're about to violate our laws when they don't show up at their hearings. But look, there are a lot of desperate people out there, but they're all around the world, and there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of them. We don't have the processes to take them all in. But I love having you on. We're going to talk more about this with Craig Shirley, because if you haven't noticed, the mainstream media are acting more like a PR firm for this, for this caravan of more than actual reporters. Now, this got me thinking: have we ever seen a moment like this in our country's history, where something like this would not just be accepted but endorsed? Joining us now to react is Craig Shirley, a Reagan biographer, a presidential historian. Craig, what in the world would our founding fathers think of what they're seeing today? Obviously, a young republic, different world, different time, but this is wild.
Yeah, but it's a great question, Laura. I'll tell you why. Because when they were crafting the Bill of Rights, and they came up with the First Amendment, it's all basically personal rights: the right of speech, assembly, worship, things like that. And kind of oddly jammed in there was the right of a free press. But the framers and the founders saw the broadsheets, and by the way, they hated them at the time. They hated the broadsheets. Jefferson and Franklin and Washington all wrote about how they hated the newspapers of the era, the broadsheets and the pamphleteers. But they saw them as a valuable ally of the people against the government. And it worked for basically 200 years. Lincoln imprisoned newspaper editors who criticized his conduct during the Civil War. Roosevelt complained about them. John Kennedy banned the New York Herald Tribune because he didn't like its Republican editorial policy. But they were basically fulfilling their constitutional obligation, which was to be against the government. Now you have a situation where they're aligned with in a far different manner, and that they're basically arguing against the rule of law and against for whatever you want to call it, but they're not behaving the way they were constitutionally mandated to do so.
Well, Craig, they're actually taking up the cause of individuals who just suddenly went from 1,600. They suddenly went from 1,600 to 14,000 because, again, everyone was oppressed at the same time. I mean, it's just the most ludicrous thing, and it's being run out of this group, Puebla Sin Fronteras, and other groups that are encouraging this and are working with other elements in the Honduran government, Honduran opposition, excuse me, and it's all being stoked for a reason. Part of it politics, and part of it they know they can overwhelm the system, and Donald Trump can try to do what he can, but I think Abel is right. I mean, these people are going to be coming in and say, I have a claim for asylum. Then what do you do? Real quick, Craig, close it out.
These are basically the Jacobins of the French Revolution now in the 21st century version. They are the stormtroopers of the deconstructionists who want to trample over the rule of law. You've got to ask yourself, what are they arguing for? Do they want freedom? We already have freedom. Do they want the rule of law? We already have the rule of law. Do they want justice? We already have justice. So it's something far deeper and darker that they're pushing for, which is to the destruction of American society and culture and the reordering of it in an oligarchy where the elites are on top and the rest are under their control.
All right, Craig Shirley, thanks so much. And we have the